Hello, my name is Bob Budiansky, and you are listening to the Marvel Card Collecting Podcast.
Hello everybody, my name is Ian Taylor and welcome to the Marvel Card Collectors Podcast, brought to you by the Marvel Cards Fan Collective, an awesome community of card collectors and creators. You can find our two groups on Facebook, details of which are at the end of this podcast, so come check us out. With me as always is my co-pilot in all things Marvel cards. He may have sleepwalked onto this podcast today, but it will be a transformative experience. For all of this, I'm certain. It's Norrin Rad.
You are so good.
That was actually quite clumsy. That was quite clumsy.
I thought it was good. I loved it. No, you're fantastic. Please, I love it.
Bless you.
Love it. And it involves a couple of different hints of our special guest today.
It does. It does. You do realise people would have seen the name of the person on the actual...
Damn it. Of course they would have. You're right.
Yeah, but that actually gives them a clue.
Yeah.
Without any further...
This is the second clue on top of the name clue.
It is the second clue. Well, there'll be a third clue now because I'm actually going to introduce our guest. Actually, he can tell people himself. So we did episode way back on episode 52, Norrin, if you remember.
Yep. Yes.
When we spoke to the
I was there, I think.
You were there. There is audio evidence of the fact that you were there on the internet. We spoke to the lovely Ken Baroff, who worked at Impel, which then became Skybox, which then became something else. I lose the thread of it. But he, of course, worked on the Masterpieces 92 and a lot of those other fun sets. And there's a photo that we saw that Joe Jusko, good evening, sir, shared, where Joe is being given a watch, I believe, to commemorate his awesome efforts on Marvel Masterpieces 92. So we saw Ken in that photograph, where the other gentleman in that photograph has had the most incredible resume of work at Marvel Comics and elsewhere. Bob Budiansky. I paused there, Bob. Sorry, because I know that you asked me to check that your surname was correct. Bob is with us on the podcast. Good afternoon. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Ian, and good morning, Norrin. Or I should say, I guess to Ian, good afternoon to you.
Yeah, afternoon here. Morning for you guys. Morning for you guys. And who knows what time it is where people are listening. So, Bob, I knew of and enjoyed a lot of your work before I knew about you, if that makes sense. I'm sure you've possibly heard that before. And I didn't realize until I started checking out what you'd done in the past that you're co-responsible for one of my favorite issues, one of my favorite Ghost Rider covers ever, which I will hold up to my camera, and I'm sure you'll recognize that.
Oh, yes, that's Circus of Crime, yes.
This is possibly my all-time, and this will be on the show notes for people listening. You can go and check it out. Ghost Rider Volume 1, issue 73 from 1982. I was but 9 years old. You can do the maths. And this issue is just, I just love the cover of this comic. It's absolutely beautiful. So clearly you have you've just done some amazing stuff while you're at Marvel. When did you start working at Marvel?
I started working at Marvel in May of 1976.
Wow. Okay. And you were there because I've read a couple of other interviews with you. You were there pretty much 20 years. Is that right?
Yeah, almost 20 years. Yes.
Wow. Okay. And what were you? Tell us how you, because we'll get onto the trading card stuff in a minute. I'm just curious to know the journey. How did you come to work at Marvel, and what was your kind of routine through that? Well,
like many Marvel artists, I was a civil engineering major in college. Just joking. I was a civil engineering major in college. Okay. But I was also an artist in the student newspaper, had a strong interest in comic books. And eventually, when I was in grad school for transportation engineering, a friend of mine had graduated the same year that I did the previous year. He had gotten a job, an entry-level job as an editorial assistant in the Marvel British department. And I'd come down to visit him, and during the holiday breaks and so on. And I met a couple of people up there. Anyway, eventually, about a year after he started, in May of '76, he called me up and he said, "I'm leaving my job. I found another job. Do you want to interview for my job?" So I interviewed for his job, which was editorial assistant at the Marvel British Department, which was basically a reprint department that took American comic books, reprinted them for the British market. And after about a half-hour telephone interview, because I was 400 miles away from the Marvel office at the time, I was up in college, my boss, my future boss, Larry Lieber, Stanley's brother, said, "Okay, I need somebody Monday." So that was a Wednesday, and I dropped out and was there Monday.
Wow.
That's straight down.
That's phenomenal. That's crazy. Wow. 30-minute conversation, invited by Stanley's brother, and boom, it's over. It's there. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we had a nice conversation. The fact that I had met a couple of the guys that worked in that department, and I knew Jay, my predecessor, and he recommended me, really helped quite a bit. And he was desperate because Jay was leaving, so he needed somebody help. So desperation is a door to opportunity, for some other people.
Love
desperate times call for desperate solutions, I suppose. So anyway, it worked out really well. We worked well together, and then about a year later, I went to go freelance, continuing to work for Marvel, and then I bounced around in different. I didn't have anything regular. I didn't have any regular gigs, but I had enough work to keep my to help me pay my bills and all that. And then about 2 years after that, Marvel invited me back as a instead of editorial assistant, an assistant editor on the regular monthly comic books, no longer in the British department. And then I quit to draw Ghost Rider, like the comic book you just held up. So. But while I was on staff as an assistant editor, I became the semi-regular Ghost Rider cover artist, which is very unusual to be the cover artist, especially somebody as young as I was at the time, to be the cover artist and not draw the interiors. But I could not. There was no way I could draw the interiors while I had a full-time job anyway. But I could do a cover once a month. And then that eventually evolved into an offer to do the entire book, and then I quit. I quit my editorial position to do the entire book, and that lasted maybe a year and a half, 2 years, and then I was invited back on staff. When Ghost Rider ended, I was back on staff as a full editor, and that started around 1983.
Wow. Okay. I know almost everything whenever I resort to Dr. Google to do some research on guests, which tends to be everyone's first port of call. A lot of the stuff that comes up would probably be the kind of next step on that journey. And I know you've spoken about this at enormous length on a number of interviews, and I've seen some panels that are recorded on YouTube where you've spoken about your time on Transformers, and how much work was put into that. I mean, we're not a Transformers podcast, but I know people really dig Transformers alongside all the other Marvel work in the trading cards. So tell us how that journey kind of fit into your path through Marvel in the 80s.
Well, as I mentioned, in '83, I came back on staff as a full editor, and I had different jobs there, doing some monthly books, doing some limited series, etc. I was mostly known as an editor artist, but I had done some writing work for the editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter. And anyway, another act of desperation. So what happened was, in November of '83, this is before I got involved, Jim Shooter was involved with Hasbro in developing the Transformers as a comic book. So Jim Shooter is actually the person who wrote the backstory, the treatment of the Transformers that everything else was based on. He did that as part of his regular day job. Didn't take an extra dollar. But he wanted to hire somebody else to develop the characters. There initially were 26 characters in the Transformers for that first rollout of the first bunch of toys. And he hired a senior editor who had a lot of writing experience to come up with names and character profiles, and he didn't like them. And I don't know why he didn't go back to that senior editor and ask him to rewrite some of the stuff to get more to his liking, but didn't happen. So one day, I remember this very specifically. It was probably like the Wednesday or Thursday before Thanksgiving, before the weekend before Thanksgiving, November of '83. So, so that, I mean, Ian, I know you're not in the States, but if you have any sense of Thanksgiving around here,
I know.
People are making holiday plans. They're trying to tie everything up. They're probably taking the week off.
They're trying to get out of town.
It's kind of crazy. Just the week before, and he's going down editorial row, each editor's office, and looking for writer editors, editors who have writing experience, and asking them, hey, could you take this project and come up with 26 characters in their profiles over the weekend before Thanksgiving? So I know he went to Larry Hama, who had developed G.I. Joe for Marvel, and Larry turned him down. He went to a couple other editors who had some writing experience. Finally, I was about the fourth or fifth choice. So again, act of desperation. So he came to me. So I said, sure, I'm not doing anything this weekend. So over the weekend, I think we kept 2 of the names that the previous writer had come up with. I came up with the other 24 names, wrote up all the character profiles. Jim Shooter liked them, and then he passed them on to Hasbro, and then the rest was, history. In other words, for 5 years, I remained on the Transformers as the prime person developing their names and character profiles, which wound up on the back of the boxes. I named about 250 of them. Ooh. And meanwhile, I was also the editor of the miniseries that initially started the Transformers at Marvel Comics, a 4-issue miniseries. And then when it transitioned into a regular monthly book, because at the time Marvel had no idea if it was going to be successful or not, so it wasn't planned as a monthly book. But then it became a monthly book with issue 5. So between issue 5 and 55, I was the writer. I wrote all of those issues except for maybe 2 or 3. And so from November of '83 until the spring of '89, I was Mr. Transformers at Marvel.
Wow. What was that experience like? I mean, coming up with character names and backstories, like what were some of your influences? I know this is a little off topic and we won't talk about this forever, I promise, because I'm terrible at this. I always derail our podcast. But I'm just, from a writer's perspective, you're coming up with these names, you're finding out alliteration sounds. Like what were some of these like kind of opportunities that you were looking at and different resources and influences?
Well, if you're a writer, you probably know this. You got to be kind of a sponge. So whatever you're exposed to, you got to absorb. So whether it was old TV shows or movies or books or what I read in the newspaper, certainly the toys themselves were suggested names. Before I did anything, I looked at the toys or model sheets of what the toys were going to look like and how they transformed from one form into a different form, and that was my initial inspiration. And then I was just doing wordplay. It also helped a lot that I was into crossword puzzles, so I had a lot, some capacity for playing around with words in my head. And probably the last thing, a little anecdote here. I used to meet regularly with various Hasbro executives and marketing people and all that. And at some point after I had produced, I don't know how many of these names, a few dozen of them, and again, they were fairly pleased with what I would turn in. One of them said, were you ever in the military? And and also about, I shouldn't say just names, I came up with character profiles too, which had all sorts of technical jargon in it. And he said, were you ever in the military? I said, no, I wasn't. He said, well, because you have all of these, you use all these words and, we love it. But, where do you come up with all this stuff? And I said, well, I was a civil engineering major. And so it's the only time in my professional career that my civil engineering major really came in handy, coming up with some jargon for toy box copy for the Transformers. So there you go.
Wow. Because there is such a level of realism with those characters, right? In terms of, I know realism is probably not the right word, but there is like a level of world building that has to go on there, right? And every good world building stuff.
One of the really the parts of the Transformers that really appealed to me, because working at Marvel, I'd already worked at Marvel when Transformers came along for like 7 years. I'd grown up reading Marvel comics, and the Marvel Universe is a wonderful place to live in as far as a reader and as far as a writer and an artist. However, if you're writing Iron Man or Spider-Man at that time or whatever it was, you have to know all of this backstory, all of these, what happened back in 1967 when they fought, when this character fought that character. You have to know all of this continuity. The Transformers was my own sandbox to play in. Nothing had been established except for Jim's original premise that he wrote in his 6-page treatment. And so I was able to expand the universe in pretty much any direction I felt I wanted to expand it into. And it really made it a lot easier and a lot more fun, not to be limited in that respect. I mean, obviously there were certain limitations. It was a comic book for kids. It can't have anything R-rated or anything like that in it. But still, it gave me a lot of opportunity to exercise my imagination and come up with what I wanted to do.
I think it's so magical that you were able to, that your contribution to this and your creations have kind of expanded in such real ways for people in their imaginations and in their own kind of structures as characters and all this stuff. Really, really amazing. That's amazing, Bob.
Well, thank you for sharing that. But my intention was not to do that. It was to make a buck.
Not so noble. How dare you, sir?
I'm glad. I mean, I've gone to a lot of conventions and people have come up to me and said very similar things to me. And I'm very flattered when people say, oh, I read the Transformers and it's so full of ideas and the characters, we all had different, personalities, and it was great. So, that's great, but I was on a deadline and I had to turn in a story every month. And that was my prime motivation to just, come up with a good story and get to the next one after that, So, but I'm very happy. And what's even more amazing and very similar to what we're going to be talking about in a couple of minutes, I suppose, is that this is work I did 35 years ago, and people are still looking at it today and still want to talk to me about it today. Yeah. And back then, comic books was a very very temporary sort of a medium. You wrote a comic book, it was out for that month, and then you wrote the next comic book, and you didn't think it was going to have this long lifespan, and yet here I am. So,
yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, funny, we had, as I know you mentioned before we started recording, that you listened to most of our interview with Greg Hildebrand recently. And it's one of the things that we were saying to him, as I'm sure you heard, is how, for that, I mean, they gave it their all, obviously, and you can see in the quality of the work that Tim and Greg did on that set, Masterpieces 94, it's incredible. But then the number of people, there's two sides to it. There's the people who remember buying that when they were children, a lot of them who are now adults and are enjoying that with their kids, and the other half of that is the fact that there are people who are discovering it now as new. And we were kind of saying to Greg, this is a big deal for a lot of people to be able to hear you talk about the work, because it does play such a maybe not, I wouldn't say personality developing, but in some cases, people have gone on to pursue careers in art or in writing as a result of some of the stuff. So
yeah, a lot of the modern artists we speak to who work on sketch cards and are trying to get into Marvel kind of came from the trading card background, right? Where they saw the trading cards when they were kids, I want to do that. Yeah. Like with Joe Jusko's work or Greg Hildebrand. And speaking about deadlines, Greg was just talking to us about how he had to do the Star Wars poster under a deadline, the most iconic, one of the most iconic movie posters in all cinematic history. So so we've heard these stories before. And again, this is a beautiful segue into our actual topic, which is Marvel trading cards.
So you're finishing your run on Transformers, late 80s, and before we recorded, you sent us the list of 11 sets that you worked on. Marvel Universes 1 through 4, Marvel Masterpieces 92, 93, 94, X-Men 1, the Jim Lee one, X-Men 2, X-Men 3, 1994, which, would that be the first Fleer Ultra X-Men?
Should
potentially
be.
Yep.
So.
And Spider-Man, the Mark Bagley series, the 94 set. So that's quite a list. But going back to kind of the late 80s, obviously the first Marvel Universe was 1990, and for many people that's the start of the kind of the big era of Marvel trading cards, because I know that there were some sets being produced by Comic Images in the late 80s using artwork from books. So how did that move from Comic Images creating sets to Marvel kind of, as I understand it, directing and kind of putting out the product themselves with you kind of as an integral part of that? So can you tell us how that started from your involvement?
Okay, well, I wish I had the answer to part of what you were asking, which is how did that transition from Comic Images doing pickup art trading card sets to in-house created trading card sets. I wasn't involved in that decision, but we had a licensing director at the time, Alan Gordon, who was dealing with Comic Images and other licensees and so on, and perhaps the publisher at the time, and perhaps the editor-in-chief. I don't know. Some people got together and said, we're going to proceed with trading cards, but we're going to bring them in-house. Maybe, there was probably some, not to slam Comic Images, I don't mean to do anything to denigrate them. They were actually pretty good licensees, I recall. But somebody decided we're going to up the quality level. We're going to make original artwork, put it out there, control what it looks like by doing it here. And at the time, I was special projects editor. So I know you made it sound like I transitioned from stopping working on Transformers to working on trading cards. It's not quite like that. I did Transformers as a freelancer, but I had a full-time job as an editor. So that was the work I did at night and on weekends when I was writing Transformers. So we're independent of that. As special projects editor, I handled anything that was not mainstream monthly comic books. So that involved retail poster program, movie adaptations, working with toy companies and developing their products into comic books, et cetera, et cetera. And so then Marvel decided to do Marvel trading cards in-house. Who's the obvious person to do that? Me. So, and I had an editorial staff to help me produce all of these different things. So that started with the Marvel Universe 1990 series that Impel put out. It was designed in-house. We didn't really know what we were doing. We just grabbed okay, you're an artist. You know how to draw all these characters here. You do 20 of them, and you do 30 of them, and I remember one of our up and coming young artists, Tom Morgan, did a whole bunch of them, and I'm still in touch with Tom today, and he's always posting his commissions that he's doing for somebody on Facebook, and he has this amazing chameleon-like ability to imitate almost anybody's style. He wasn't as good as it back then as he is today, perhaps, but still he was very versatile. So we pulled all this together. I came up with what would go on the backs. I grew up being a baseball card collector, so I knew how baseball cards worked. Didn't know anything about the trading card industry. I dropped off trading cards of any type for decades. But I thought, well, we have all these characters, and we'd already established they have power ratings in the Marvel Universe comic books. And why don't we adapt that and put them into the cards? And we'll come up with some other statistics, whether fake or real. We came up with what percentage of battles they won, and I know for the Aunt May card, how many pies she baked. We did whatever we felt like. I'm
going to find that now. I've got the binder here.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so funny because I just spoke to Tom Morgan because I was able to buy a Silver Surfer collector, a huge Silver Surfer collector, far bigger than me, who's really nice. His name is Mark. I forget his last name right now. He sold me the original art piece that Tom Morgan did for the set.
Oh, great.
So the original black and white, and Tom was so pleasant. Just funny how it comes full circle because no idea. Yeah,
we're a small family. We all connect to each other. Yes.
All connected.
And we stay connected, even though we've all gone different ways. So anyway, I put all that together. I remember there would be trivia facts on old baseball cards. So I came up with the "Did you know?" as a little extra fact about each character, and we came up with different color schemes, I believe, for the different, for villains and for heroes and so on. So we just had as much fun as we could trying to make these cards stand out and be appealing to our fans, and also realizing that we would try to pull in new people who just like trading cards and would like these colorful cards full of all these weird characters, and might pick up the trading card and decide to buy some comic books as well. And that's how it began. A little summary.
That's crazy. So we're looking at the back of the 90 sets now because Ian and I can't help.
I just found the Aunt May one. I'm sorry. I don't know why I've never noticed this before. Pies baked 984. Meals served 11,743. Wrinkles on face, too many to count. And this is the one I love. Life-threatening illnesses recovered from, 23. Because, of course, she's always in peril at some point during Spider-Man's history. That's outstanding.
Well, you even have it on the back of Stan Lee. No prizes awarded, 547. Comics written, uncountable. I mean, there's just so many fun facts. Favorite saying, enough said. Love all of this. I mean, it's just phenomenal to see these cards and to hear that you guys were just having so much fun.
By the way, I don't know if Ken showed you this, but...
Oh, don't do that. Don't show me that. Don't. Oh, my God.
So what we're seeing here, folks, is an uncut sheet of Marvel Universe 1990. It's just wonderful to see that.
Wow.
That's amazing.
And I have more.
Yes, you do.
We'll put images of these on the tasting notes, folks, for those who...
Another one. This one came in several sheets.
Yeah, that's right.
And so on. I don't want to bore your audience.
No.
They're fine. They can wait.
They're okay.
Yeah, I think neither the other two sheets. One.
Oh my God.
And here's another.
Goodness me.
Okay.
And we're only at the first set.
Yeah, no, that's fine. What I do like about the first set, actually, we were talking about this with Ken, was the number of different 4-sheet promos that there were through various places, like previews and
the number of different promos you said.
Yeah, these little 4-sheet ones that these have got the diamond logo on the back. So obviously through there's a number of different ones, and they're such nice little things to chase as collectibles, because obviously those big uncut sheets that you've seen don't come up very often. But these are rather lovely little things to chase. When you see them, and I think I bought most of those from you, if I remember correctly.
Possibly, yeah. I remember getting a bunch. I got a bunch from a collector, and so passing it forward.
I know you uploaded some. Tell. I almost said Uncle Bob there. Forgive me, Bob, but the reason I almost said Uncle Bob, and if I say that again, please take it as a term of endearment as opposed to anything else. So I used to work with a guy in the West End called Bob West, who passed away a few months ago, sadly, and everyone called him Uncle Bob. So whenever I say the name Bob, I always precede it with Uncle. Let's tell Uncle Bob the story of this hologram, Norrin. And
those holograms still hold up. There's 5 in the set. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So how did that come to thing? So you're looking at baseball cards, you're thinking of holograms. What was the process there?
Well, in general, not just this set. The people who I was working with at the trading card company would suggest what I think is commonly called chase cards. I believe that's the term. Again, remember, I knew nothing about trading cards when I walked into this. So I didn't go there and say, hey, we got to do metallic cards, we got to do hologram cards, we got to do, whatever, lenticular cards. I didn't tell them anything. They came to me and said, we have all these choices. We think this would be a good idea for this set. I said, sure, let's do it. So, I would defer those kind of questions to the people on the production end of things, the people who are actually printing the cards.
Well, that's those obviously. I mean, who were they called at this point? At that point, they were called Impel. So obviously, Ken's very much the in that camp. But Norrin, you have the original production
plate.
Plate,
so I was
hologram. Right?
Wow.
It's just so I'm a dangerous person. But
He's going to get it now, right? Okay. So we did an episode while he's gone away. We did an episode, and Norrin was very much like, I've got something really exciting. I could tell you were
Really
itching
exciting.
to tell me something. And you proceeded to obtain this rather nice item, including a description of how the things are actually made.
Yes, from someone who worked at the factory where you guys got these done, full circle. He, talked about the chemical baths, talked about the negatives. So it's just, looks like the card. It just has, I'll get rid of the blur, but basically it's the card and it's just a metallic plate in terms of how they were printed. I don't know how much this interests you, but it's pretty crazy to see that it is metallic and it's a sheet. So they're created there and they make copies, which are called shims or shims. I forget how it is. Shims. And so just pretty kind of full circle, just amazing. So I think, to progress forward, you're there, you're making these cards. Keep moving us forward through this timeline because I feel like I'm vicariously living through your life right now, and I know it's creepy, but I'm here for it. So,
It's been a while, so I don't have every statistic in my head, but my impression was that the Marvel Universe 1990 set did very well in the marketplace. It blew out of the stores. I believe it opened up new places to sell these cards, like comic book retail, direct market shops. They wanted them for their customers. So it got a very favorable response from the public. And before you know it, what are we doing next? So we did a Marvel Universe 2 set, I believe was the next set that we did.
That's right.
Which was in 1991. And the big change, as far as I was concerned, obviously you wanted to build on what we were doing. I think the big change was we diversified the number of artists. We tried to find artists who were more connected to some of the characters. For at least for our fan base, the people who were already buying the comics, they'd be, perhaps more into, seeing that the artist who drew the comic book was also drawing the card. Yeah. But the main thing was the design of the cards. So, like I said, the first set we did in-house, we had the head of our production, or I don't know, maybe not the head, but the person who was number 2 in our production department, Dawn Geiger, who's now named Dawn Guzzo nowadays, but Dawn Geiger, she designed the cards. So, but that was part of that was in addition to her regular job of running the Marvel bullpen, which is where all the production work was done. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a big ask to tell her to do this as well as do your regular job. So we farmed out the design of the cards. And the way that happened, you kind of touched upon it briefly earlier. You mentioned the Stan Lee card. Okay. So now, if you look at that Stan Lee card, that shows a portrait of Stan in the 1990 set. We definitely wanted to include Stan. There it is. We definitely wanted to include Stan because he's Stan Lee. He's as responsible as anyone for the modern Marvel universe and so on. Yeah. So this portrait of Stan had been done several years earlier for a fan magazine that Marvel put out. I think it was Foom, Friends of Old Marvel.
That's right.
Right. And somebody remembered, hey, why don't you use that portrait of Stan? So I had now we were paying a certain fee to do original artwork for each one of these cards. This artwork already existed. It had already been paid for. The printing film, the film that it was printed from existed somewhere in our files, and so we could just pull that and reprint it. But we wanted to be fair, so we wanted to hunt down the artist who did that and say, we'd like to reprint your artwork for a trading card. And so his name is Arnie Sawyer.
That's right.
And Arnie happened to be, at the time he did that portrait, he happened to be a neighbor of Stan's out in Long Island. Like his family were neighbors with Stan. They lived like next door or something. I don't know. And he was a big comic book fan. And he wanted to do a portrait. He came up doing that portrait. And then then Arnie went on to start his own graphic design firm in Manhattan. So I called up Arnie, found out all this information. I have to say, Arnie was very suspicious of me. Like we want to reprint your artwork for this Marvel trading card set. We want to pay you this fee. Said, well, you can pay me. I said, well, that's what we're paying everybody else, and they're actually doing original artwork. This one you already got paid for, so I think we're being pretty fair about it. Well, okay. Anyway, once we got past that initial discomfort level, Arnie's a great guy, and he's a terrific designer, and he had a whole studio full of designers helping him. And when he found out we were doing Marvel trading cards and we needed a designer, it was like 1 and 1 makes 2, we were a perfect fit. And he went on to design all the sets that you mentioned earlier.
Wow.
Every set. The Marvel Universe 2, 3, 4, all the Marvel Masterpiece sets. And he has a credit on a lot of the checklists, by the way. If you look at the checklist of the later sets, you'll see his name there as designer. So what? Just by this weird accident that we dug up this old portrait of Stan Lee, we found an incredible designer. And his office was only a few blocks from the Marvel office, so I'd walk over there and we would talk about what are we going to do for this set? What are we going to do for the design on the fronts and the backs? And it was an incredible relationship.
Wow. Here we go. Yeah. Marvel Universe 92 checklist. Creative director Bob Budiansky, that's you. Designer Arnie Sawyer. Background paintings by Joe Jusko. Of course, we'll talk about that in a moment.
And by the way, I have a credit on that card in subsequent checklists because Arnie wanted a credit. He says, I want a credit. I said, okay, well, if you're going to get a credit, I'm going to get a credit. I'm more responsible for this than you are. So then I started giving myself a credit, and I decided I'm going to call myself the creative director, because I was.
Well, you were.
Wow. You were. You are.
Hats off to you.
Thanks, Arnie, for that credit.
Wow. It's interesting you mentioned the I'd never kind of realized it because I'm looking at Marvel Universe 2 91 card number 2 because it just struck my eye, and of course that's Daredevil, and if I'm not mistaken that is John Romita Jr.'s artwork.
Yeah, it looks like it. Yeah,
definitely the style of the way he does the hashing.
Yes.
On there, and of course he was the artist at the time, I believe. So
yeah.
So I've got them around.
Yeah, that time we were going directly to the people who were most responsible for the way the characters were looking in the comic books, and if they were available and willing to do it, we'd work with them.
Well, that absolutely makes sense because then you've got that connection. That's kind of okay. It's a different product to the comics, but it's of the same cloth. If you're a kid buying the comic and then you get the cards, and if the style matches, then that's kind of a no-brainer.
Funny enough, that's actually what happened to me. So my first card was 1992 Marvel Universe Series 3, Silver Surfer. And that was Ron Lim who did that one. And I was reading the comic books of Ron Lim, and I remember being a kid and seeing that artwork and reading the bio and everything like that, and obviously making that connection. Wow, what a really crazy full circle type of thing that is. Okay.
We wanted the cards to be as authentic as they could be. Not just some random piece of art that was picked up from some issue from 30 years earlier. Just, this is what the characters are today. And I think most of the time except for the special sets like where we hired Joe Jusko or Greg and Tim Hildebrand, most of the time we succeeded at doing that.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
So these cards are selling really well. One of the things I love, I wish I'd pulled it out of I've got about 15 long boxes of comics around the corner here, but they're not within reach. I remember seeing the most fantastic little thing in Marvel Age, and I love Marvel Age because it's kind of your kind of preview of what's coming up in the Marvel, comics. So it's kind of a comic about Marvel Comics, and I remember there seeing a double-page spread about Marvel Universe 1990, which was mock-ups of the different people who worked at Marvel at the time, the names that readers would know, done as cards from the Marvel Universe series. I wish I had it in front of me now because I can't remember who was in it. I can't remember if you were on that one, but I remember just seeing that and thinking that's absolutely genius. A little bit of a.
Yeah, I was wondering if I had one of them at within arm's reach here.
Well, I was going to ask because I had heard a rumor on that, and you might not remember this. I had heard a rumor that those were actually, aside from the printed spread in the comic, that those were actually made in a very small quantity.
They were.
Oh.
In fact, I have an uncut sheet upstairs.
Oh wow! Okay.
If you want, I can run up and get it. It's very fun. I know exactly where it is. But basically, it shows the Marvel editorial and sales and marketing staff.
That's it.
And we would give them out at conventions.
Oh, right. Okay.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we've done 2 years in a row, and we'd get the different artists to draw our portraits and then write who we are on the back of the cards, and have a space where we could sign them as put an autograph in there.
I remember they are extremely sought after as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sought after.
I have a stack of my own. Actually, I have the entire set, with everybody's signature, including Stan's, somewhere in the house.
Wow.
And then I have, like I said, an uncut sheet for one of the sets.
Yeah, no, I've seen a couple come up on eBay. I think Tom DeFalco's came up on eBay UK recently.
Tom Falco, yeah.
And it was unsigned, but it was just like they're just really nice cards, and they've got their little panel that can be signed, when you're at the con.
Yeah.
So because I think there are some in the UK, because there were cons in the UK that people, including Stan, came over to in the late 80s, early 90s. So not that we don't have the big con circuit that you guys have in the US that I know. You still, I mean, obviously 2020 notwithstanding, you still do a fair number of con appearances, were you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I was supposed to do one in Florida weekend of March 20th, and that got canceled because that's when the lockdown began.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, 2020. Let's not dwell. So as people listen to this, that will be so last year. So hopefully
that will be over.
This will be.
Let's start moving towards Marvel masterpieces.
All right, hold on. Everything's a cue for me. So Marvel masterpieces.
Cue for me.
Hold on. You mean?
Oh yes.
You mean these?
Holy.
Yep.
Yep, that would do it.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here, folks, is an uncut sheet of Marvel Masterpieces base cards, which I have one here somewhere as well, rolled up in a tube.
That's amazing.
They are rather beautiful pieces.
Gorgeous.
Yes, they're wonderful set.
So we know we're blessed that Joe is in Marvel Masterpieces collector group. In fact, he's in MCCW as well, and he occasionally pops on when he's got time, and he'll share something or a little tidbit, or he'll find some original. One of the things he did last year, which was nice, he found some uncut sheets of the promos that were released for the set that he had, and I think he had 10 of them, and he very kindly sold them into the group to members, and did a little remark on each of them as well, and I was lucky enough to manage to buy one from him. So and he's told us, and we've read online in various interviews, how tight the turnaround was on that set, and how short a time span he had to create those pieces. So, and I think it came out October 1992. So when going back from that, do you have any recollection of actually? Okay, when was Masterpieces as a concept kind of formed? How did that happen, and how did it lead to Joe becoming the artist chosen?
So I kind of vaguely remember. Again, a lot of the ideas for what sets to put out and in what kind of format, as far as the quality of the cardstock and the finishes and chase cards, all that. A lot of that came from most of that came from Impel or Skybox or whoever we were working with at the time. So they wanted to do a premium set, and we came up with the name Marvel Masterpieces. I don't know who came up with it, and it would be unlike the previous sets, which are much closer to the way comic books look. They were black line art with color. This would be a set that would be painted. Have a more of a full a full illustrative look. And I'd been working with Joe as an editor. I'd been working with Joe for years. He'd done a lot of covers for me, painted covers for various projects that I was the editor of. And he's terrific talent. Loved the characters, knew the characters, and I thought he'd be the perfect person to execute this entire set if he were available. And foolishly, he said yes. Drove himself crazy for the next several months. I'm sure I helped. And, because deadlines are deadlines, and, the work had to get done. As I recently rediscovered, Marvel did not even advertise that Joe was the sole artist of the set and its initial promotional materials because we weren't sure he'd be able to finish it. But he kept plugging away, and he finished it. So and he did a great job. And Joe, like so many of the artists that I worked with back then, just has the amazing capacity to come up with a single image that defined a character, that tells you so much about a character. And that's what we were going for. We wanted to, we had a trading card gives you one opportunity to say this is who this character is, and he was like the perfect person to do that. So. It was a great experience working with him. It was a great set. You might have heard the biggest hurdle, hurdle's the wrong word. The biggest kink in the whole operation was the Wonder Man card. Have you heard about that?
No,
this is.
Oh, you haven't.
No.
Okay. Do you happen to have it nearby?
Yes, it's over here. Hang on.
If you could show it, that would be good to do a show and tell about this one.
Yeah.
Right, yes.
Okay. So. While you're looking it up, so as comic book fans might be aware, Wonder Man was also, in his comic book personality, an actor. So Joe thought it would be a good idea to show Wonder Man. Yeah, there he is. Okay, holding the Academy Award. As you can see in that card, he's not holding the Academy Award, which is gold colored. So. At some point, I'm not sure how, but our legal department was made aware that Academy Award people were not going to give us permission to show the Academy Award on our card. We would get in trouble if we showed their trademarked or image of the Academy Award on one of our Marvel trading cards. So we had to contact Joe at the very last minute. The whole set is done. I believe he was at a convention somewhere. He might have been in San Diego or something. He said, Joe, you gotta paint out the Academy Award and paint something else in there instead. So at the very last moment, he was in his hotel room fixing up that card so that we can get it out there.
That's absolutely hilarious.
What? That's amazing.
Yeah,
I love it.
I had no idea. That's freaking great. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just giving it to you. I'm giving you the story from 3,000 miles away from whatever hotel room he was panicking trying to get it done. But if you ever get around to speaking to Joe, ask him about that. He'll probably freak out all over again.
We'll have to get the bleep.
We're hoping at some stage we will be able to talk to Joe.
Yeah.
We always
he'll tell you with a lot more emotion than I would.
I'm sure he will. He's been absolutely wonderful in engaging with people who are fans of his work. So hats off to him for that. In fact, that's a nice little segue onto Marvel Universe 3, so 1992, which of course Joe did the backgrounds on those. Mm-hmm. And that was a very, very big shift in terms of the style. It's just... and that is just amazing. And Joe found the original painting of those backgrounds.
So with this set, I wanted to take Marvel Universe quite literally and have a universe as the background for each card. So I commissioned Joe to do a background, and as you can see, there's galaxies and stars and all sorts of, nebulas exploding and everything else, all connecting all these cards into one giant image. Wow. And it was kind of a logistical nightmare because we had to place each card on a background, background that's this size, and tell Joe, okay, here's where you put a nebula, here's where you put a galaxy. Don't have it covered up by the artwork that's going on the card. You could do it in these interspaces. And, it was a challenge, and he liked the challenge. He kind of rose to the occasion. But, it made the cards really special, I think.
100%. It's actually one of my favorite card designs of all time. The shapes behind each character, circles, the triangles, the rectangles, all that kind of really amazing stuff. I love how you have that dimensional shift, and I think the concept comes across really clear.
Yeah,
I love that design.
We always try to put in extra stuff. Not just like here's a character, here's a description of who they are. We try to pack as much in there as we could to to appeal to the card collecting audience out there, and so they could discover these little things that might go under the radar to the casual person, but to somebody who's really into it, they can they can discover all of this stuff about it. Excuse me, I'm getting a phone call from my mother.
If you need to take it, sir.
Yeah, we can edit, so no worries.
That was my mother.
Okay.
Oh.
So I have to hats off to you there that you've got "There She Goes" by the Lars as your phone ring. That is quality choice. That is quality choice.
You're finding out all sorts of things about me today.
No, this is good. I can't remember what Greg's wife Jean, her phone rang halfway through the interview, and it doesn't actually come out on the audio what the phone ring was. But I remember we recognised it.
We did recognize it because we all three of us started singing it because Greg's super like weird like we are, so it was really funny. But funny how the tradition of Marvel Universe Series 3, the cards we're talking about, the 1992 set, that tradition kind of still exists today. In Marvel Masterpieces 2018, we talked to Simone Bianchi, and he also put it into a universe kind of context as well, right? The characters are Marvel characters, but they exist outside in this special Marvel universe kind of world, right? Where it's very dystopian and cool structures and concepts behind every character. So it's crazy to see how, and obviously that probably is not the influence of the cards, but the cards influence that kind of choice from illustrators. And I think that's just such a fantastic way to tell a story in an image. And it's just so interesting to see how you are responsible for kind of coming up with this concept and breathe it into life into trading cards. Just phenomenal. I would say, very similar to what we were talking about earlier with Transformers, where none of this stuff had been established yet. There were no rules. So what I and my staff, my editorial staff, Arnie Sawyer, whatever we came up with, if we wanted to do it, there were some challenges, but there was no one to tell us, you can't do that. If we went to Impel or Skybox, like Ken Baroff we mentioned earlier, if I went to him and said, hey, I want to do the 100 cards on the first and second sheet of the Marvel Universe 1992 edition. Want to do them as one big image. By that point, he was used to us. He was saying, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's figure out how to make this happen." Yeah. We were a good team. We fed off each other. And I know Ken was promoting before this 92 set. That we can do. Nine cards together as one big puzzle card, and we started that with the X-Men set. We did the Danger Room as one big piece. Right. And I think he pushed it, and I think he'd been pushing something like that for a while, and finally he convinced us that it could be done, and we came up with a way to do it. We came up with, okay, here's how we're going to do the artwork, and the Danger Room is the perfect opportunity to do it because we can scatter a lot of characters among the Danger Room, and so and once we were able to establish that it was done for that, we were able to do it for other sets. Wow. Well, that's phenomenal, too, because the 9-page is kind of a hallmark of Marvel cards, right? It's so integral in the sets now and so important to us. And then, of course, Jim Lee being the artist of X-Men in that set, which is still today a beautiful set. I remember how Ken was talking to us about the Danger Room. Remember that, Ian? And how excited he was to get it to fit on the 9-page thing, and talking about how the complication of trying to get it logistically to fit in there so it can be cut evenly. You know what I mean? So it looked nice. Oh, there it is. Hello.
There we go.
Hello, lovely.
You can see the Danger Room is partially put together at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then there's another section somewhere else. Maybe here. Yeah, because part of it's over here.
Yes.
It's over there. You can see all that. Anyway, so he figured out how it could be done, and because as you know, they have to print these cards so that they're randomly selected and put in packs. And how they show up on the sheets and all that. So anyway, it was a lot of fun figuring it out, and the artwork that came out of it, especially for this, starting with this X-Men Danger Room, was just gorgeous.
It is gorgeous.
Every time we challenged the artists to do something like this, they rose to the occasion.
Well, Jim, those are my first introduction to X-Men was from the cards, from Jim Lee's art. I think a lot of people, you know what I mean, born in 85, 86, around that time, are coming back and looking at Jim Lee's work and just being like, this was like influential for my love of X-Men. You know what I mean, and so forth. So it's pretty
Norman, cool. you were the target audience. You know, we could hook you on the X-Men and start buying those comic books. You know, that's
if it was on a street corner, I'd be there in a cardboard box. Okay, like very different for me if this was an illegal thing.
To be fair, the amount of money that we spend these days on cards, we're almost both in cardboard boxes. But let's not dwell on that too much. It's actually while you mentioned target audience, I just want to roll back slightly, because the one thing that at the very beginning, the Marvel British department, which I know is different to Marvel UK because that was a different thing that came later. Of course, I was of the age where your efforts in the Marvel British department were kind of my introduction, if you like, because all that Marvel content was put out weekly in UK editions. You had Spider-Man Comics Weekly is the big one I remember, and there were a number of other different ones in the kind of late 70s, early 80s, and then Spider-Man and Zoids was the one that kind of started me off. Now I think that had moved to Marvel UK at that point, but that's kind of where I started, if you like, those UK editions, those UK reprints. So thank you for that, Bob.
Well, it seems like I got my claws into both of you at different times, you know.
And thousands and thousands of other now adults.
It's so, like you're here right now. It's so weird.
We are representing.
Get out of my head.
So Marvel Masterpieces 94 was Tim and Greg.
Right.
And beautiful. 93 was a number of different artists. If I remember, obviously Joe did some pieces for that. I think Ray Largo was in there. Sienkiewicz was in there. I believe is it Jim Steranko? Might have had.
Let's see, is Steranko in here?
Yes. Oh, that's an uncut from 93. I've never seen one of those ever.
Oh my God! How dare you!
Wow.
I want to say, just for the record, you know, I listened to the interview you had with Ken Baroff, and he pulled out all the swag as you guys were talking. I felt I couldn't let that go. I don't know if I can reach his level, but I have some, and I have to show off some of it. So anyway.
I have to say, you might have trumped him on that one. I mean, he had the shiny binders.
I'm keeping track.
93. Yeah. He didn't have a 93 uncut sheet. I've never actually seen one of those before. There are some pieces in there that, to this day, remain my all-time favourite masterpieces.
Here's a Steranko one at the top.
That's it. That was the trick.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, we just spoke to Bill Sienkiewicz too, and he was talking about the work he did on those. Just phenomenal set. Probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think is this his Wolverine over here? It looks like it.
I know that's his Hulk for sure, but that's definitely his Wolverine.
That's his Ghost Rider on row 2.
Yeah, it looks like his Hulk over here.
Yeah.
Well, you got Julie Bell in there too, right? And that's the first time she started getting on the set.
Perhaps.
Yeah, baby.
And the Iron Man too, Julie as well.
Yeah, anything shiny, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
We gave her, we weren't stupid. We gave her the shiny one. She's good at shiny stuff.
She said that when we spoke to her.
She did say that. That was really funny. She was a trip. Her Boris is so nice.
There are some artists in there who to this day are I've not really seen them on other sets, and then to this day they actually bewitching is the artwork. I can never actually quite read because the artist writing on the back of the 93 sets is so incredibly small. Michael Kaluta.
Doctor Strange is still one of my favorite Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
It's just such a nice concept and design. Just really pretty. Really, really, really nailed that kind of supernatural stained glass thing. Really nice.
And I believe he did the Storm as well, which is just beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, he did Storm, yeah.
And it's an artist I've not heard of much before or since, actually. I really do need to kind of try and track down more of his other work. But so how did this set's obviously got a number of artists coming through? Was that because of kind of time constraints in order to do a full set, like learning from the lessons of 92, or how did that
there was no mandate to have one artist do the entire set, as we had done with Joe Jusko in the 92 set. So we just changed it up, and we knew, especially I think after what Joe went through, trying to squeeze this whole set into a schedule, it's a big ask to ask one single artist to produce 100 different cards or whatever the quantity is within a very limited time frame. So it just made sense to divide it up among a bunch of different artists. Yeah. And I think it may not be as iconic as having a single artist like a Joe Jusko or like the Hildebrands do an entire set, but it's a very nice looking set overall.
It's a beautiful set.
100%. It's a beautiful set. Well, Ian and I talk about that all the time because there's definitely people who are in two camps where, people want one artist, you know what I mean, for masterpieces, just like traditionally. But Ian and I talk about this all the time. I love seeing like the different works. I just think it's special because you're getting to like deep dive into multiple perspectives. I don't know. I've always been a huge fan of that as well.
The one regret that I have, I don't have too many regrets about the cards he put out when I was working on them, is that Arthur Adams, who's a phenomenal colorist, he did a lot of cards for us, and they were all beautiful. And he would have liked to do an entire set by himself, and we never gave him the opportunity. Who knows why, but probably deadlines or just the fit wasn't right there. But he would have done a phenomenal set if he had the opportunity to do an entire set by himself. But the reality is these sets have to be produced within a certain time frame. That was the overriding concern, and I know from a fan point of view, it's like, well, why didn't you have so and so do a set or so and so do a set? Well, they're human beings. They have other things going on at times.
Yeah.
They can't just stop everything and do an entire set for
You mean you didn't have artists in a special room that you would let out every once in a while? And
we did for a while, and Human Services found out about it, and they told us you can't do that. Take the locks off the doors, and give them some fresh air every day. So
those sick bastards. Whatever. That's
they
fine.
had rules. They had rules back then.
You actually have to feed them. Yes. Apparently.
Feed them. Yeah.
Feed them, water them. Mark Bagley did that amazing Spider-Man 94 set, which I have over here somewhere. Binders. I'm looking at a wall of binders here, Bob, and you can't see it because it's behind the camera. But because not every set has its own binder, it's quite difficult sometimes knowing which set I've put in which binder. I have a feeling I have put it in with the Fleer
Use your
Ultra,
card sense.
The Fleer Ultra Spider-Man binder that came out for the 95 Fleer Ultra set. I have a feeling it conveniently has room in for the 94 Mark Bagley set as well. It does. Here it is. So obviously Mark was very much he was the main artist at that time. Obviously, first Venom was during his tenure, I believe. Not first Venom, first Carnage was during his tenure. Of course, Venom was Todd McFarlane. And what I love about this set more than anything else is the way that it's so interconnected as one artwork image. I mean, this is one of the master print promos that came out. This is I love these promos. They're so beautiful to collect. So obviously that was a whole one artist doing that. How did that come about? Because obviously that is a big ask for someone who. Am I right in thinking he was still doing the monthly?
Oh yeah, he was.
Art duties.
Yes.
Wow.
He well, unlike other artists, like I'll use Arthur Adams as an example. I love Arthur Adams' work, and he's wonderful.
Phenomenal.
Mark was a lot faster, so it was a lot easier to ask somebody like Mark to draw an entire set of trading cards, and without him disturbing his regular commitment to a monthly Amazing Spider-Man comic book. So it just worked out. I don't remember the exact dates, you have from this date to that date to do it, but He was able to do it. And he's a wonderful guy to work with. He was up for the challenge. You could see I don't know about each set of 9, but most of the cards were designed around a set of 9 cards that fit together.
Yeah.
And he just loved it. He just loved the challenge of putting it together and making it work.
Killed it. Just absolutely amazing.
And there are some very of the time deep cuts here that you just don't see even now in Spider-Man retrospective sets, like characters like Sticks and Stone, who were very Spider-Man in the 90s, but I don't think I've heard them mentioned since. Not even in the Fleer Ultra Spider-Man 2017 set that came out. That I don't know if you're aware of the modern stuff that comes out, Bob, but they did that set in 2017 that was very much a throwback to the and kind of paid homage to the style of the Fleer Ultra Spider-Man 1990s set. Characters like Silvermane and Blood Rose. I'm geeking. I'm geeking.
Blood Rose is so cool.
You get me into that period of Spider-Man.
At that time, if we're doing a set, well, any set, frankly, but especially like a set that was specific to a brand, in this case, Spider-Man, myself and my editorial team, we didn't just say, "Oh, we're going to do Silvermane." We'd go down the hall, speak to the editors of the Spider-Man books, and say, "Hey, who is current? Who should be included in this set?" And whoever they thought were the current characters that the fans would know, or should know if they're not currently buying the comic book, then that's what we put into the set.
Yeah,
love it.
That's great. I think that's what kind of sets my pleasure centers tingling a little bit, if you pardon the expression, is the fact that you could do that it came from the same editorial and creative place that were putting out the monthly comic books. So these card sets come from the same wellspring source, which I think is why they're obviously, looking back now, they succeed so well because there is that connective tissue there, kind of baked into the fabric of it, but also because these are the sets that very much set the blueprint. You were breaking new ground. You were doing what you were world building in terms of how these sets could be and how they worked, and that has become the bedrock of countless sets since and still. Do you think back on it at all? You've mentioned Arthur Adams, could have done his own set and was up for it. Did you have any other kind of ideas for sets that maybe you had planned or would have liked to do but didn't come to fruition at all? Or do you kind of feel like it all kind of landed on the page?
I don't remember. I mean, frankly, when you're working on it, it's like, okay, here's the schedule for 1992. We're doing, X-Men, Marvel Universe, Marvel Masterpieces.
Yeah.
Well, that's an exhausting schedule. It's not like I'm saying, oh, can we fit in a set about the Hulk or the Avengers? It's like, okay, sure, that's what you want. We'll get working on it. So it wasn't like I was looking that much into the future as far as, I was just figuring out, well, how are we going to make this set different than the previous set? Make it stand out, make it appealing, make it fresh. And that was most of my focus back then. And so if I had ideas about what else I wanted to do, I've long since forgotten them because they were never while I was in charge. And I moved on. As you can see, my sets went through 1994, and after that I was no longer involved because things changed. I was moving on to different responsibilities, and the cards were taken in a different direction by different people who were in charge of them at that point. And so I stepped out. I stepped out of the, off the stage, let somebody else take care of it.
Wow.
Well, you certainly made an impression. Goodness me, I'm just just the breadth of the stuff that's here. Obviously, the artists involved did tremendous work as well. Are you still in any way aware of what happens in Marvel trading cards at all, or how it works these days? No.
It's a slippery slope, man. Be careful, okay?
I was going to say, would
down there.
If they picked up the phone to you tomorrow, the current manufacturers of trading cards, would you ever want to have anything to do with producing them again, even as just a one-off? Do you think?
Sure.
Random scenario.
It pays the bills. Then,
I don't read the comic books. I don't know, I don't know the last 25 years of comic book history, so I don't know how much I have to offer, other than maybe coming up with some original ideas of how to present the cards. And my original ideas, for all I know, might have been executed since I left working on cards. Like, we did that, 2 years ago. We did that I have no idea. So I might be able to offer something, but remains to be seen.
Wow.
Interesting. Wow. Okay.
This is crazy.
I love. Listen, I know that it's a long time ago, and I know your recollections of all of it might not be quite as detailed as if it was yesterday. But what you've told us, I just think is fascinating. What we're trying to do when we speak to people like you who are kind of on the ground, you were making these sets, is just kind of get under the skin of what it was like to create them, and how things came about, and kind of the oral history of it that no one's really spoken to anyone about. No one's really documented it. So, everything you've told us today is a bonus. It's stuff we didn't know before. So
thank you so much.
Happy to share.
Thank you for that. I don't know if I've got anything else I can ask Bob at this point. I'm still reeling on the Wonder Man.
I have maybe like one or two questions. One, you showed us a lot of uncut sheets. Just if you can text me your address when you get a chance, just by the offhand, just let me know where you're at. I'll just, I don't know if I'll come by or anything. That's weird.
I will say, I recently inventoried my uncut sheets. I have about 174.
Oh, good grief. Okay.
Not that I want to keep them all, but I do have a lot.
Well, we will be talking, you good sir, because that's amazing. In all seriousness, you're fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this. Did you have any questions for us? You mentioned before that you might have one or two questions for us or something you want to ask or anything
just
like that.
A couple of things. Which is this, we're still on the podcast?
Yeah, we're still recording, but we can edit.
Or we can edit.
Why don't we save my questions till after the podcast? So
okay.
All right. They're more off topic a little.
Our listeners can speculate on that one, and anyone who posts a comment that's closest to what Bob asked us will win a prize. Bob, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I know that it was a job and you did it and you kind of moved on. I just want to say thank you. I said this to Greg. These were things that you created as part of your job, and I know that there was a creative aspect to it, but they are so appreciated and loved by a lot of people that we speak to who are still getting into the sets. Some people who are new to them and didn't get them when they were kids in the 90s, and some people are getting their children into them. So they still have a life, and people are still collecting them, and people are still trading them, crazy though it sounds. So, thank you for all that you've done to create these sets. You did, chart a course, and you have collectively, as a team, all of you who worked on this, kind of set the standard, if you like, for the modern era
100%
trading cards. So thank you.
I kind of realized that when, after a couple of years of doing these sets of cards, I started seeing card sets from competitors, from DC and maybe, I don't know, Image or some, I don't know who. And I said, these look just like the cards we put out last year.
Well, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Right.
As I believe it was Oscar Wilde said that. I can't remember. Anyway, Bob, thank you. Do you remember how we sign off our podcast?
Enjoy collecting.
Thanks for listening to the Marvel Card Collectors Podcast. Visuals and tasting notes for each episode can be found on our Facebook page. You can subscribe and leave us a voicemail via our home on anchor.fm/MCCP. We're also on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms. Please take a second to subscribe, like, and review our show wherever you get your podcasts. Our podcast can be found by Googling at the MCC Pod, which will also find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Our Facebook community is at MCCW, Marvel Card Collectors Worldwide, and MMC, Marvel Masterpieces Collectors. The great music we use is called Rocket Power by Kevin MacLeod. Thanks to the collectors, artists, and creators who support the Marvel Cards Fan Collective. We'll see you next time, and remember, it's a small hobby but a fun one. Make mine Marvel and enjoy collecting.